Me said day, oh. Daylight come and me want go home. Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me want go home. I knew of this song before I even made it to America as a little immigrant who migrated with my family, because in Jamaica, in school, we used to sing, come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me want go home. And we used to hear our folklore heroes like Miss Lou sing, come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. So that's to give you a idea of the magnitude of this individual here. So Harry Belafonte, another great one, has left us and gone on to the ancestral realms. Before I read this whole thing to you right here, though, let me say this. It is appointed unto man to die but once. Every man shall die once. Okay? It's a part of the journey of life. It doesn't mean that life is over. So when I see people saying stuff like, we lost a great one today. Lost? We didn't. He lived a full life. Harry Belafonte lived a long life. I buried my grandfather in Jamaica last year at 96 years old, and Harry Belafonte has left us at the same age that my grandfather exited this earth, at 96 years old. That's a long life. And not only was his life long, his life was purposeful. His life was meaningful. And his works that he did on earth, they will go on forever. He will always be remembered. So, American singer Harry Belafonte has died of congestive heart failure at the age of 96. In case anybody wants to know what exactly did he pass away from. At a certain point in life, you get to the age where organs do fail and give out. Harry's heart has done its max. It carried him for 96 years. And the heart said pit, pat, and no more. Right? So the civil rights icon was pronounced deceased at his home in the Upper West Side of Manhattan with his wife, Pamela, right there by his side. Harry Belafonte made a splash in Hollywood in the 1950s, becoming a star with his hit song, Day-O. It is also known as the Banana Boat song and Jump in the Line. Those were his hits. Now, I remember coming to the United States of America, 8 years old, a little immigrant child, and people would tease us. It was rough back in the day. And one of the things that they would always say to us was, go back on your banana boat. And they would try to sing this song to us. But we would remember the song, and we would sing the song this song to ourselves. Right? Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me want go home. The song actually served as a strength for a lot of us who wanted to go back to where we knew as home, but since we were so small and our parents had brought us here, we didn't have a choice. We had to assimilate into American culture. Anyways, that success ultimately led to leading roles in big films, Carmen Jones and In the Sun, right? But as he became more and more of a household name, Harry Belafonte, he started to speak out against racism that he experienced in Hollywood, as he described himself as a singer of music with roots in the black culture of American Negroes, Africa, and the West Indies. He was very close to a lot of West Indian leaders, so I could see how he would sing the song, Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. You can't tell me he didn't sound Jamaican right there, right? But he probably had picked that up from visiting Jamaica a lot and from parring with his Jamaican or his Caribbean friends, as we would call it, right? Harry Belafonte used his platform. He didn't just go to sleep and took the fame and the fortune for himself. He used his platform, and he did get blackballed out of Hollywood, but we will talk about that at another time. Let's give our due justice and our due respect right now. So following the news of his death, Senator Bernie Sanders hailed Harry Belafonte as not only a great entrepreneur and entertainer, but also as a courageous leader in the fight against racism and worker oppression. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump also tweeted, "Through his extraordinary contributions, including his notable advocacy for human rights and social justice, he leaves an indelible mark on this world." And Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., wrote, "When I was a child, hashtag Harry Belafonte showed up for my family in a very compassionate way, or in very compassionate ways, rather. In fact, he paid for the babysitter for me and my siblings," she said, sharing a photo of him comforting Coretta Scott King at her father's funeral service. "I won't forget," King wrote. "Rest well, sir." Harold George Belafonte Jr., whose father later changed the family's name, he was actually born in Harlem to West Indian immigrant parents in March of 1927. Okay, so he was born in Harlem, but both his parents were from the West Indies. That explains that accent. So culturally, a lot of people might not know this, but the patois that we speak, that you hear like Jamaicans, Trinidadians, Antiguan, Barbudan, Grenadans, all the Caribbean islands speak, when you see them in person in places like business places, out in public in America and in a professional environment, they might sound like how I'm sounding now. But you best believe that that lingo is spoken at home. So I take that back and I stand corrected. He is a son of the Caribbean, but he is also deeply rooted in African American culture, just like he said, right? And he was born here, so that is his birthright. So he grew up with family members who were often unemployed or above the law, he later recalled. And in 1944, Harry Belafonte dropped out of high school to join the Navy, where his black shipmates introduced him to works of W.E.B. Du Bois and other African American authors. So not only was he all that and then some, he was also a military service member who served in our great military of the United States of America. Now, while stationed in Virginia, Harry Belafonte met Margaret Byrd, the daughter of a middle-class Washington family who was studying psychology at the Hampton University, and they married in 1948, going on to have 2 children together. Following his discharge from military service, Harry Belafonte became interested in acting, and he enrolled under the GI Bill at Erwin Piscator's dramatic workshop, where his classmates included Marlon Brando and Tony Curtis, both legends in Hollywood. He first took the stage at the American Negro Theater, where he worked as a stagehand, and he became a lifelong friend with fellow actor Sidney Poitier, another legend in his own right. But he had trouble finding roles as a black man, and instead he sought fame with his music, developing his own takes on popular folk songs. Belafonte's album, Calypso, was said to be the first by a single artist to sell more than 1 million copies after it reached the tip of Billboard album charts in 1956. And it stayed there for more than 30 weeks straight. Back then, there was no streaming anything. Albums cost money, and he sold over 1 million when it first came out. I can only imagine over time how many albums he actually really sold. So by 1959, he was the most highly paid black performer in American history, with contracts for appearances in Las Vegas, at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, and at the Palace at New York. Speaking of his hit song, the Banana Boat song, in a 2011 interview with NPR, Harry Belafonte told how the song is about rebellion. He said, quote unquote, "When I sing the Banana Boat song, the song is a work song," he said. "It's about men who sweat all day long, and they are underpaid, and they're begging the tallyman to come and give them an honest counting the bananas that I've picked so that I can be paid. And sometimes, when they couldn't get money, they would give them a drink of rum." These lyrics in the song that says, "Work all night on a drink of rum," people sing and they delight and they dance and they love it, but they don't really understand, unless they study the song, that they're singing a work song that's actually a song of rebellion. Harry Belafonte continued to perform well into the 21st century, appearing in films like Black Klansman in 2018 and portraying South African Bishop Desmond Tutu in Breathe in 2005. But starting in the late 1950s, Harry Belafonte took on a larger role as a major activist in the civil rights movement. He had befriended Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. early in his career, and he put up much of the seed money to start the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Harry Belafonte was then one of the main fundraisers for the organization, as well as for Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He also provided money to bail out Dr. King and other civil rights leaders. And he would often host the Reverend at his spacious New York City apartment. Harry Belafonte even stood with Dr. Martin Luther King at the historic March on Washington in 1963, as well as the Alabama March from Selma and Montgomery. And he made sure that Dr. King's family was well taken care of after Dr. King was assassinated in 1968. I'm telling you, y'all, this man really used this platform, and he really is a king. The singer also spoke out about the racism that he experienced in Hollywood. His 1957 film Island in the Sun, which hinted at a romance between his character and a white woman played by Joan Fontaine, generated outrage in the South. How dare they put a biracial couple on our damn television screen? So much so that a bill was even introduced in South Carolina legislature that would have fined any theater that dared to show the film. Wow. So, while in Atlanta for a benefit concert for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1962, he was twice refused service at the same restaurant, and television appearances with white female singers like Petula Clark in 1968 and Julie Andrews in 1969, and this angered viewers. But he also faced some criticism from the black community, some of whom suggested earlier on in his career that he was only successful due to the lightness of his skin, as his paternal grandfather and maternal grandmother were both white people. And when he divorced his wife in 1957 and he married Julie Robinson, the only white member of Catherine Dunham's dance troupe, the Amsterdam News wrote this, quote unquote, "Many Negroes are wondering why a man who has waved the flag of justice for his race should turn from a Negro wife to a white wife." Wow. By the 1960s, as his friend Sidney Poitier became more and more of a star, Harry Belafonte's film career had dried up. He was before his time. He did stuff that others saw as bucking the system and crossing a line. So like I said before, he was pretty much blackballed, whiteballed if you want to call it, out of Hollywood. He said that Hollywood was not interested in the socially conscious films that he wanted to make, and he was not interested in the roles that they were offering him because he was not interested in seeing his people portrayed in a certain way on film. Damn. Could you imagine? Now today you have actors that they just take anything just to pay the bills, you know? And we just look at it like, hey man, it's just a film, he's paying the bills. But in reality, Harry Belafonte was more concerned about how the world would see his people when they saw these films. So his special Tonight with Belafonte won an Emmy in 1960, the first for any black performer. But a deal to do 5 more specials for the show's sponsor, Revlon, fell apart after just one more was broadcast, when he said that Revlon asked him not to feature black and white performers together, and Harry gave the check back to them and said, I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do. You're asking me to put segregation in my work, and that is not my idea. Now, y'all got to remember, his grandparents on both sides were white, right? Grandfather on one side was white, grandmother on the other side was white. So he is deeply biracial. So to ask somebody like this to pay attention or give special treatment to only one race while ignoring the other, it's a disrespect. It's kind of like asking Bob Marley to choose between black and white when his father was a white man, and it was a white man's seed planted in a black woman's womb that created Bob Marley. So a taping of the 1968 special with Petula Clark was also interrupted when she touched his arm, and a representative of the show's sponsor, Chrysler Plymouth, demanded a retake. And now I understand why up to today a lot of older African American people, they would never drive a Chrysler, they would never spend their money at that company. Now, when he finally returned to acting as both a producer and a co-star of the Angel Levine, he had his Harry Belafonte enterprise hire 15 black and Hispanic apprentices to learn filmmaking by working with the crew. Hands-on experience. One of them, Drake Walker, wrote the story for Belafonte's next film, The Western Buck and The Preacher, after starring Portier. Harry Belafonte went on to receive a Kennedy Center honor in 1989, a National Medal of Arts in 1994, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2000 and 2014. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science also gave him the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award in recognition of his lifelong fight for the rights and civil rights and other causes. And just last year, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But Belafonte continued to remain political up to the very end. In 1980s, he helped organize a cultural boycott of South Africa for its apartheid policy, as well as the Live Aid concert and the all-star recording of We Are the World to fight famine in Africa. I know a lot of y'all remember that song. We are the world. We are the children. I believe that song had many stars in it, right? Too many to name. To include Stevie Wonder, to include Michael Jackson, to include Dionne Warwick, to include Diana Ross, to include, I could go on and on. Had no idea that Harry Belafonte had pulled this together. What had this king not done in his lifetime? And like I said earlier, this is not a loss. He lived 96 years. And all the stuff you have heard me read to you right now read to you so far or said to you so far, that's not even half of what he had done. His humanitarian work ultimately saw him advocate for the release of the imprisoned Nelson Mandela in South Africa, and was appointed as the cultural advisor to the Peace Corps by President John F. Kennedy. Harry Belafonte also briefly considered running for the U.S. Senate in 1986, and the following year he replaced Danny Kaye as the UNICEF's Goodwill Ambassador. In later years, Harry Belafonte became an outspoken critic during the George W. Bush administration, accusing then Secretary of State Colin L. Powell, which is a Jamaican by the way, of abandoning his principles and calling Bush the greatest terrorist in the world. That's brave. He was also outspoken during the 2015 New York mayoral election when he openly campaigned for Bill de Blasio. On the campaign trail, he referred to conservative donors, the Koch brothers, as white supremacists, and he compared them to the KKK, forcing de Blasio to distance himself from those comments. Wow. The very person he was trying to defend started to distance himself from those comments because they were too strong against people who were too powerful. Go do your research. You'll see. So, the end of the election day in 2016, the New York Times published an opinion piece he wrote, urging people not to vote for Donald Trump, who he called feckless and immature. He repeated those remarks 4 years later as he claimed that Trump would be problematic for the black community. Harry Belafonte is now survived by his wife Pamela, his children Adrian, Beisner, Sherry Belafonte, Gina Belafonte, David Belafonte, and stepdaughter Sarah Frank, and stepson Lindsey Frank, as well as 8 grandchildren. He was blessed. He used the time the Almighty gave him to do powerful stuff, a life of servitude, and he was truly a representative for us and someone that we can look up to. Rest in peace, Harry Belafonte. You came, you saw, you conquered, and now you are on to the ancestral realms. You shall live forever, and you will never be forgotten. Catch y'all on the next video. It's SouFLoTV. I'm out. Peace. Oh, by the way, this piece, so that we are not sued for plagiarism, can be found in the Daily Mail. I'm out.